Nehemiah chapter 11 is where we're going to be this morning. We're going to be working through two chapters, 11 and 12. We are taking a deep dive into the topic of worship. So here's the questions we're going to be asking. Who do we worship? Or what do we worship, I guess? Why do we worship? What is worship? And how are we supposed to worship? We're just going to hit all the worship questions this morning. The reason we're asking those questions is because, well, this is what we see in Nehemiah chapters 11 and 12. So we've been working through the book of Nehemiah for a lot of weeks. This is week 10 now. Congratulations, week 10. We're almost done. We've almost found our way to the end of this book. And this right here, chapters 11, 12, this is the spiritual high point of the book. Next week, our last week in the study, just want you to know it ends on sort of a downer. So just come prepared for that. It's still good. You should still show up. But today, in these chapters, lots of choirs, lots of singing, lots of instruments, lots of rejoicing and praise and worship. Today, here's what we're going to see. The people of God have seen the goodness of God, right? He's answered prayer. He's provided for them really every step of the way. So they have a story to tell of God's faithfulness on their lives, both individually and corporately as well as a body. They've seen God do some amazing things in their midst over the course of the last couple of months. Their hearts are full. Their lips are ready to just sing, right? So it's going to be a fun chapter as we zoom on this, as we look into their worship gathering and why they're singing. But let me start here. Let me ask the question, what comes to mind when we talk worship? Like, what comes to mind when I say worship? What do you think of? Like, maybe you think of what we do here Sunday morning, 10 a.m., during the worship gathering, like specifically the singing before and after the sermon. And that is worship. Maybe you think of what you do in the car when you have nothing else to listen to. So what do? You just pull up Spotify and you hit worship playlists, right? And then you're just worshiping in the car. That's worship. But worship is more than that. According to the Bible, worship is much broader, much bigger than that. So before we dive into Nehemiah chapters 11 and 12, I think we just need to talk worship for a few minutes. I want to zoom in, or I want to zoom out from Nehemiah 11 and 12, and I want to give you some teaching on the doctrine, on the theology of worship. So, welcome to class. Welcome, this is Worship 101, and you don't even have to double tithe, right? You're going to get class and sermon today. Let me give you quickly three truths about worship, three clarifying biblical truths. According to this book, what is worship? So let's start here. Everyone worships. All right, everyone. Romans chapter 1 makes it very clear everyone worships. Worship is not just something that followers of Jesus do. It's even something that non-followers of Jesus do. Religious, irreligious, it doesn't matter. Everybody worships. Everyone you know worships someone or something. So let's use some examples. The friend that you have on social media who's just relentlessly firing off political rants and opinions, they're worshiping. Or that uncle that never misses the opportunity to be in the tree stand, right? Or Ohio State fans. They're worshiping. It's misplaced worship, but it is worship, right? Anti-religious, atheists, they're worshiping. Your grandma who loves animals more than she loves you. Worshiping, right? Everybody worships. So the question is, who or what are they worshiping? Everyone worships. And let me tell you what worship is before we get too far down into this Worship 101 class, right? Worship is giving something ultimate glory. And glory is a word that means it's like heavier, it's weightier than anything else in your life. It holds this place of prominence in your life. It's more significant. It is the thing that you value most. So if your heart had a treasure, that would be the person or the thing that you value above everything else. Like that's what you worship. So what you worship is that thing that you just can't imagine losing. You couldn't do life without that person or that thing, right? And if you had to willingly sacrifice, if you had to give up your time, your energy, your possessions to pursue it, then you would without hesitation. That is the thing you worship. And Romans chapter 1 makes it abundantly clear. Everybody worships. You worship one of two things, according to Romans 1. You either worship the Creator God, the God who placed the stars in the skies, who spoke the world into existence, who knit you together in your mother's womb, or you worship creation, right? Which means we end up worshiping ourselves, right? We worship our glory, our vanity, our security, our relationships, our home, our stuff, our comfort. We've given ourselves over to the worship of us. And I know what you're thinking. Scott, I am here today, right? I showed up 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I've come to church. I'm on Team Jesus. I love him, right? And here's what I know as a pastor. Can we just talk for a second? It is possible to come to church, to claim to love Jesus, to follow him, to sing songs to him, right? And do this on a regular basis. It's possible to check the boxes and then pivot the rest of the week and worship someone or something else entirely. And I would argue it's not only possible, but I think it happens more frequently than we like to admit. So we are guilty of misplaced worship. And this misplaced worship works itself out in all sorts of ways. Let me give you some examples. So we can worship, for example, we can worship our kids. Our children can be the idols that we worship. Like our kids are a gift from God, but they are not God. You with me? Right? Like we can base our identity around their accomplishments, around their academic achievements, right? But it's misplaced worship. Like if we do this, eventually what's going to happen is they're going to get to the point where they realize what's going on. Mom, Dad, you're putting this weight on me that I can't bear, and they're going to grow to resent you. So what's going to happen? Misplaced worship. Okay, we can worship our bodies. Okay, some of us like to work out. We like broccoli. If you like broccoli, I love you. Not a fan, right? Like we want to be healthy, and that's good, right? But you can get to a point where you stop pursuing stewarding your body and you start to worship how it looks on the outside. What happens then? Problems, misplaced worship. We can worship our careers. We can worship our comfort. We can worship our spouse. Okay? Like, I love you. I don't care who you married. All right? They can be the most amazing person in the world. They're not going to fill that God-sized hole in your heart. But they might be hardworking. They might be amazing. They might pray for you at every turn. I don't care. They might be an amazing person. A terrible God. All right? All the married people said, amen. Yeah. And if you're single, you'll learn. You will learn, okay? Everyone worships. Everyone worships. So who or what are you worshiping? Because we see that misplaced worship leads to all sorts of problems. Number 2, worship is all of life. So we like to think that worship starts when the music starts playing. And then when the music is over, then worship's done. But that is not how the Bible describes worship, okay? Listen to this. We're not going to put it on the screen. Just listen to this. Romans chapter 12, verse 1, it says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. So worship is not limited to just music. It is something that happens all throughout your day. When you work, when you forgive your spouse, when you give sacrificially, when you hold your tongue instead of snapping at that person, that's worship. All right, what do you do, or what you do with your eyes? All right, what you do or where your thoughts go when they wander. What you're looking at on your phone. It can be moments of worship. All right, there are moments where you're saying, Jesus, you are my treasure. You are what I value most. I'm orienting my life around you and you alone. I'm trying to live in full, glad obedience and surrender to you. Or maybe those are all moments where you're not saying that. Maybe those are all moments where you're saying something else entirely. Jesus, I don't worship you. Like, I don't treasure you. I actually worship a lesser God. Number 3, worship is our response to God's goodness. So in other religions, we see a lot of chants, but very rarely do we see actual singing. There's a difference. Okay, but God's people, we have a reason to sing. All right, we have a reason that praise should mark our lives as followers of Jesus. So every other religion, there's sets of rules that you need to follow. You're trying to work your way from earth to heaven based on your morality, your achievements, your rule keeping, all that you do, right? But what happens is you do that and you constantly start feeling, man, I'm not good enough. Like, God is distant from me. Like, I'm not enough. So maybe if I fill my life with enough religious things and I say these chants on repeat, and then somehow I'll just earn it. I'll earn favor. I'll earn affirmation. I'll earn acceptance. I'll earn blessing from God. But listen, church, we do not sing for those reasons. Okay? We have all of that. All that's ours in Jesus. So I don't sing to get God's love. He loves me. And the gospel is proof. Like, I'm fully loved as a child of God. I don't sing to earn his forgiveness. I've been forgiven. I don't sing to earn acceptance with the Father. I sing because I am accepted. I'm adopted as a son or a daughter. Ephesians would tell us that we have every spiritual blessing in Christ Jesus. So we're not earning anything in our worship. We're not earning anything in our singing. We sing because we've been given more than we deserve. We sing because we're no longer orphans. We're adopted into God's family. We sing because we're no longer looking for identity in our careers, in our accomplishments, in our wealth, in our relationships. No, we sing because in our relationship with the Father, he now calls us a son or a daughter. We sing, we don't sing because we're trying to earn forgiveness. We sing because we've been forgiven. The price has been paid. So, church, we have reason to sing. So whether you've had a great week or a terrible week, life's been good, life's been bad, if there is breath in your lungs, he is worthy to be praised because he's good and he's been gracious to us. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Scott, I get it. Thank you for Worship 101, right? I believe all this stuff. This is the theology of worship that I affirm, okay? And that's awesome. Congratulations. But I want us to do more than just agree with and affirm these 3 truths about worship. Here's what I want us to do. I want us to ask hard questions. I want us to evaluate, is Jesus still my king? Is he the thing that I glory and I worship in? Is my life truly about worshiping him with my heart, soul, mind, and strength? And if you're saying, yes, God, it is, like I love him, cool, then let's have a practical discussion on what that looks like. Well, what does it look like to go throughout our day and worship him? So class over, you all passed. Good job, okay? It's time we drop back into the text. Nehemiah chapters 11 and 12. I want to show you three things quickly from the people of God and how they oriented their lives around God's goodness and character and promises and how they actually worshiped, okay? And as we jump back into this, I want to give you some context because I realize this is week 10, and not everybody has been here all 10 weeks of the series, okay? So If you're asking, who in the world is this Nehemiah guy? You're in the right place. Listen up. Okay, God's people are no longer in the promised land with a king and a kingdom. They're an oppressed people living under the rule of King Artaxerxes. Nehemiah, he's this Jewish cupbearer to the king. God burdens his heart for his people because the city of Jerusalem is completely destroyed. Like gone, right? No walls, completely just left vulnerable. We know that Ezra, before this, went back to Jerusalem, rebuilt the temple, but there's still no walls up, which means nobody's moving in. All right, the church, the temple is there, the church is there. No one's in the city, so the people unite. Right? God provides for them, and they complete this wall construction project in 52 days. It's amazing. And once the project is complete, the word is proclaimed, the people confess their sins, and now they're ready to have this massive worship gathering. That is the overview of Nehemiah chapters 1 through 10 in a minute. There you go. First thing I want to show you, though, in chapter 11, I'm just going to warn you, it looks ordinary. It looks unimpressive. It looks like simple people doing simple stuff, but it is done, I would argue, for the glory of God. It is worship. I want to show you this, okay? Here's what we know. Ezra moved to the city. He rebuilt the temple. Nehemiah shows up a little later. He gives leadership to the construction project going on. And eventually, what do you see? Like, we have this updated, rebuilt temple, this massive wall that's been built, but the problem is no one's in the city. No houses have been built. There's no people. Nobody's buying real estate, building houses in Jerusalem. There are a few religious leaders in the city, but everyone else, they're settled outside of the city, like outside of Jerusalem. The farmers, they have their fields. Shepherds have their livestock. Nobody's moving in. It is a problem. Look at this. I want to read, I know we covered this weeks ago. Let me read this to you. Nehemiah chapter 7, verse 4. It says, "The city was wide and large, but the people within it were few, and no houses had been rebuilt." That is the state of Jerusalem. So, day after day, they're coming into the city, 52 days straight, to do this construction project, so that the city would be secure, and so that the people would be secure. And now that the job is done, the construction's over, they're looking around and going, hey, who's going to move in? Like, we have a priest, we have a pastor, we have this awesome rebuilt temple, walls are done. Come on, we're open for business. Let's go. Who's moving in? And everyone's like, yeah, about that, I'm good. That's what they're saying. I'm already settled. Like, I have this sick place, living under the stars at night. I have my field. I have my livestock. Like, if I were to move, I'd have to hire a manager for my field. I'd have to hire someone to watch over my sheep. Like, nobody wants that. It'd just be easier if I stayed where I'm at. So, glad the city's rebuilt. I'm good. Has anybody moved before? Who enjoys it? Yeah. There you go. It's a lot of work. Noah and Becca know this. Lots of packing. Lots and lots of packing. Lots of work the day of, and then what happens? You're living out of boxes for months. Right? It's just terrible. The people of God, they felt the same way. They're looking at their lives and they're going, if we moved right now, it would be this significant cost. I'm good. And by the way, keep in mind, they're not calling up a real estate agent here, right? There is no, let's go house hunting in Jerusalem. There are no houses. So they'd have to build from the ground up. Who wants to do that? That's no fun at all. So the people of God, they don't want to do this. They don't want to be in Jerusalem. It's costly. It would take a bunch of time and energy. Why move? But in this moment, here's what we see. God is at work in the city. All right, he's working to preserve his chosen people so that Jesus the Savior would come through this lineage, the lineage of God's people. So he's not just trying to rebuild a city, he's rebuilding a people who hadn't experienced the word, who hadn't walked in his ways, who, he's rebuilding them to love him, to worship him, to walk in his ways, and to be so uniquely different from the rest of the world that the nations would say, wow, like the Lord is good. So God is at work. He's at work in the city, in this dusty city of Jerusalem with ordinary people. So people had to move into the city. And the leaders knew that, and the people knew that, and they were called to do so, all right? Nehemiah chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. Now the leaders of the people, they lived in Jerusalem, and the rest of the people, they cast lots to bring out 1 out of 10 to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while 9 out of 10 remained in the other towns. And the people blessed all the men who willingly offered to live in Jerusalem. So they come up with this plan, all right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to draw sticks. And if you draw the short stick, you are going to move into Jerusalem. And listen, the families that made the decision to put God's plan over their wants and desires and comforts and ease, they're worshiping God. That's what I'd argue. They're worshiping God. The people are saying, okay, what's central in my life isn't ease, isn't comfort, isn't wealth. It's not my dream home, or the fact that I'm just introverted and my neighbor is so far gone that I can't even see their house. God, if this blesses you, if it actually honors and blesses you, that I would move into a city, that I would work a job, raise kids, live with a bunch of loud neighbors. If that's what you want, to rebuild the city, to rebuild this people, then yes, I'll do it. That's what we see. And the rest of the chapter filled with names of people who actually took that step. Names of people who took that step, heard the command of God, and they followed their spiritual leaders. People who sold their houses and who worshiped God with their lives. Here's the first thing. How do we worship? Well, we worship God with our lives. One of the ways that we can tell, that we can see who or what it is that we're worshiping, is by asking the question, well, who am I living for? What am I living for? Like, what am I sacrificing for? So, what's natural for us in our sinful state is self-preservation. It's comfort. Like, that comes naturally. It's the path of ease, the path of least resistance. But as followers of Jesus, that is not how we're called to live our lives. Like, he is king, and he has access to our whole lives, everything. I was thinking through this week, and I was encouraged. Right? I was encouraged just thinking through how our church, we're not just a bunch of rule keepers who like to gather and listen to okay sermons and hear good music. Like, there are, just looking around, there are some actual genuine worshipers in here who sacrifice their time, their talent, their treasure to make much of King Jesus. I see that in us. And I think of all the people throughout the week serving at the Center of Hope. I think of all the people right now watching kids back there in our kids ministry. Like, who would willingly choose to be around children more than they have to? I love kids. I'm kidding, right? Why do we do that stuff, though? Why? Because Jesus is the king of our lives. Like, that's why. So church, thank you. I see that in us. Thank you for worshiping Jesus with your lives. But I also want to say this. If that's not what marks your life, okay, if your hobbies get all of your time, if convenience and comfort gets all of your energy, then maybe you should be taking inventory of your life. Like, maybe you should be asking the question, is Jesus actually my king? Or do I come to church on Sundays? Do I check the boxes? Do I tell everyone that I have a religious affiliation when there is absolutely no evidence at all in my life that Jesus is king? And I'll be honest with you, I know a lot of people like that. I do. Like, they claim to follow Jesus, they claim to love him, but can you come to Bible study? No, I can't do that. My schedule's just too busy. I don't have time for that. Okay, would you serve? Like, can you give an hour a week serving in our tech team or in worship? Or like, there's plenty of ways to build up the body throughout the week. Can you do that? No, I don't have time for that. I can't do that. All right, well, then could you at least make sure that all of this happens by giving sacrificially? Can you, like, keep the lights on? No. Sorry, I can't do that either. That's not in my budget. Okay, then so what part of your life is built around King Jesus? Like, what part of your life is built around worshiping him? Well, you twist my arm and I'm willing to show up on Sunday mornings for an hour. Yeah, like I'll sit on the couch and I'll tune in. Listen, I love you. I do not think that's what Jesus actually meant when he said, lay down your life and follow him. Right? Like, would we be a people who worship Jesus with our lives? And I'm not trying to shame anyone. I'm not trying to guilt you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to invite us into a greater joy, because here's the problem. Some of us, our greatest joy is the hobby that we do on the weekend. And here's the thing, in 10,000 years, nobody, including you, is going to care. There's joy to be found in Jesus. Okay, so how do we worship? We worship with our lives. We also worship with our voices. So the leaders, they call the people of God to move back into the city. Eventually, the city's repopulated. And the leaders in the city, they set this scene for this epic worship gathering. It is awesome. Look at this. All right, Nehemiah, jump ahead, chapter 12, verse 27. And at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness, with thanksgivings, and with singing, with cymbals, harps, and lyres. So worship isn't just happening organically here, all right? Nehemiah is prepping and preparing for this. And if you notice, where are all the worship leaders? Where are all the Levites? They sought the Levites in all their places. All right, so they're spread out through the region. Let me give you some context to why this is the case. Okay, so in the Old Testament, to be a priest was not a full-time job. It wasn't, all right? They'd come to, here's what they do. They'd come to Jerusalem. They would serve in the temple. They would lead worship. They would offer sacrifices. They would preach sermons. And they would do that 2 weeks out of the year. And the other 50 weeks, they would go home. They would worship with their families. They would work jobs, cultivate fields. And there were 20-something, I'm terrible with math, 20-something sets of priests that would rotate on these 2-week schedules, come into Jerusalem, do their thing. That's what they do. So Nehemiah, he's like, no, that's not happening like this time. I want everyone. I don't just want the guys on the schedule this week. We need everybody. It is all hands on deck. So they do that, okay? They come back and they organize into these 2 massive choirs. One is going to the north, one is going to the south. They're literally going to march on the wall that they had just rebuilt, and they are singing God's praises and faithfulness, right? And they're going to end combined in front of the temple. It is this massive worship gathering. Let me show you how this all works out. Verse 31. Then I brought the leaders of Judah up onto the wall, appointed 2 great choirs that gave thanks. One went to the south on the wall to the dung gate. What a beautiful smell that had to be. Amazing place, right? Nehemiah's like, you guys march that way down to the dung gate and be blessed, and I will go this way. It's kind of funny. It's actually what happens here. Verse 38, the other choir of those who gave thanks went to the north, and I followed them with half the people on the wall above the tower of the ovens to the broad wall. Let's jump ahead to verse 40. So both choirs of those who gave thanks stood in the house of God, and I and half the officials with me. And then look at verse 43. And they offered great sacrifices that day, and they rejoiced. they rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women, children, they also rejoiced, and the joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. So wouldn't it be awesome if we were the kind of church that woke up the neighbors because we were so excited to sing songs about Jesus? That's what's happening here. The joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. All the nations were hearing this. They were looking into Jerusalem, and they were saying, what is this beautiful, joyful sound that is happening? Why are they singing? Oh, they're singing because they've seen the Lord do a great work in their lives. That's why. Now, I love what it says here. All right, God had made them rejoice with great joy. I love that. Now let's talk. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you've been in a place like this. Like maybe you've seen God's faithfulness. Like you've seen him answer prayers. You've seen him provide. You've seen him take away bitterness and capture your heart. You've seen him just work in very tangible ways. So much so that your heart is ready to dance. You're ready to sing. There's this melody of worship playing in your heart. Worship to God, right? Like God, even in the midst of storms, even in the darkest of days, you've been faithful to sustain me, and I can't wait to declare that you're faithful and you're good. You don't have to raise your hand, but I'm sure some of us have been in a place like that before, right? But maybe that's not you. Okay, maybe you show up to worship gatherings like this one, and you're just going throughout your week, and you just feel distant from God. Like there is zero affection in your heart for him. The question is, what do you do there? Like, what do you do to stir up some affection so that you can start to worship God rightly? What do you do? Well, here's what you do. You give yourself a pep talk, right? I can do this. I'm going to worship. I'm kidding. That's not what you do, right? Here's what you do. Or actually, here's what I can tell you. And I realize I just said do, right? Here's what I can tell you, okay? For me personally, when I'm in those seasons, I go back to the scriptures. Always. Like I go to the characteristics of Jesus. I think of how he's promised to never leave me or forsake me. I think of how faithful he's been to me. I think about how God's all-powerful. He literally created the cosmos, and he personally knows me. He knows me. I think of how God has been faithful to forgive all of my sins, past, present, future. I think of who Christ is, what he's done for me, his power, his future promises. And when I think of Jesus, when I think of his promises, his character, his power, his work, all of a sudden, that needle in my heart begins to move and my affections are regained. That's what I see in my life. And there will be seasons where you're just going to come here and you're going to feel distant. Like your affections are just going to be cold. There's going to be those seasons. Absolutely. I just think that is part of our pursuit of Jesus. You are not going to be running constantly on all these spiritual highs. It's not going to happen like that. The Bible is filled with example after example of people walking through these seasons. But listen, God is faithful not to leave us there. All right? As we turn our attention to him, he makes us rejoice with great joy. So church, we have reason to sing, and I hope we take inventory of our life and see we have reason to sing. Like even in the darkest of days, we have reason to sing. And by the way, I love this. I love who's singing here. What does it say? The women, children, they also rejoiced. In this society, men were the pace setters when it came to worship. But in this text, what happens? Everybody's coming together. Women, kids, all generations, they're coming together. They're worship. In most churches, I think it's reversed. Most of the time today, I think it's reversed. I think what we see today is that women, children are the ones actively participating in worship. And men, what do? We just sit back passively and we're just spectators. We just watch it unfold. We're like, real men don't sing. That's what we like. We're like, if you're a real man, you're going to sit there and you're going to just run through these scenarios in your head. Okay, if a bad guy comes in here, what are we going to do? How am I going to throw a chair at him? Where's the exit, right? How am I, Jason Bourne. Singing? No, I wasn't in theater in high school. That's not, right? But that's what we sing, but I love the Bible, all right, because it's filled with the most masculine of men, and they are 100% worshiping God. Real men sing. Real men worship. Take David, for example, okay? He is a dude that literally killed wild animals with his bare hands, cut off Goliath's head at age 13. I don't know what you were doing at age 13. Probably in your mom's basement playing with Legos, right? David is a dude who also wrote songs about God's grace. He sang, he worshiped, he danced. Real men worship. So men, who are we worshiping? Like if the thing you're most passionate about is watching someone throw a ball on TV, like if the thing that just gets you emotional is when you turn on the news and the news breaks that your politician didn't get elected, you start freaking out. Like I don't know what that thing is, but what is at the center of your life? Who do you worship? Real men worship throughout the Bible. The first guy to worship, you know who it was? Adam. Like he worshiped the Lord at first sight of his wife. On the other side of the scriptures, you see Revelation, another massive worship gathering where men, women, children were all singing his praises. Worthy is the Lamb. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. So listen, guys, worship is not anti-Bible. I'm not asking you to go through the motions of some religious gathering, trying to make an emotional appeal, but I want you to actually engage with God and worship the one who you will worship for all eternity. Some of you are sitting here going, God, this is a little heavy today. Man, it just gets worse, okay? Point 3, how do we worship? We worship with our wallets. Yeah, I'm going there. So even Jesus said no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. In other words, Jesus says, I can look in on your budget and I can see what you really care about. I can see who you worship. You have a bunch of money set aside for vacations, but you have very little money for the local church. You have money for your hobbies, but nothing for caring for the poor and the least of these. Like, do our financial priorities line up with the kingdom of God? In Nehemiah, here's what we see. We see a people who are so in love with God. They're so excited by what he's doing that they stop by the temple. They swing by the temple and they're like, hey, nobody's asking us to do this right now, but can we give our tithes and offerings to the Lord? Let me show you this. I love this. Verse 44. On that day were men appointed over the storerooms, the contributions, the first fruits, and the tithes to gather into them the portions required by the law for the priests and for the Levites according to the fields of the towns. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and the Levites who ministered. So these guys, they're not saying, okay, worship only happens when we sing. No, they understand that worship is happening in their giving. Like as we give, we are worshiping. They have gone decades without a temple, without a pastor, without a preacher, without the word being proclaimed, without the people of God coming together to sing songs of praise. They see what's happened as a result, okay? They look around, they see the moral compromise. They see the compromise in their families through the generations. They see the darkness that's around them, and they're so excited. They're excited because there's finally preaching. There's finally worship. Like they're excited because God is doing something in their midst, and they're like, we will joyfully give a tenth of everything we have to see that the church has all that we need so that the word of God can be proclaimed and the worship of God can continue. That's what's happening here. We see how God has access to these people's lives, to their voices, and to their wallets. They saw their finances as worship unto the Lord. They were giving out of this joyful posture. Now, I need to say this real quick. Does Jesus need our money? No, he doesn't, right? It's not like he's just waiting for you to start giving. It's not like his church is going to be hindered or stopped or somehow he's just going to stop getting the glory because you won't write that check. He doesn't need your money. But what he's after is your heart. And until you start declaring through your giving that Jesus is Lord, I have to be honest with you, you're a slave to greed, to materialism, to security, to comfort. And he wants to set us free from that. Church, would we worship him in every area of our life? Would we worship him with our lives, with our voices, and with our wallets? As I wrap this up, I just want to say this. There are a million other lesser gods fighting for our attention and for our worship, and we have given ourselves over to them, to the worship of them. But there is only one who is worthy of our praise, and he's worthy of it all. So let's be a people of worship.